floor amendment offered by Delegate Simon to House Joint Resolution 718 on page 2, line 68. Strike the entire line through.
Strike all through all of lines.
Strike all of 68 and all of 69.
Yeah.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Simon.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the motion.
Delegate S.
The idea here is that we proceed in the special order for the election of General District Court judges, Circuit Court judges, Juvenile Domestic Relations Court judges, and the JERC Commission members. And we simply don't proceed today with the election of a member of the State Corporation Commission. Many of us didn't know that there would be such. In fact, we were told yesterday, upon questioning by the delegate from Charlottesville, that we would not be taking up a State Corporation Commissioner today. It was told that we were only going to be voting on judges, and particularly only those that were re-ops. And so this all came as a surprise to all of us this morning. We haven't had time to do an actual proper process, and so the point of this motion would be, should you guys vote yes on this motion, there'd be no election of a State Corporation Commissioner today.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the floor amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will advise the delegate and his colleagues when I spoke on this topic yesterday, the accurate information up to that minute when I spoke about the prospect of having this particular election, that is of the SEC commissioner today, it was unlikely to happen or not going to happen, and that, as everyone in this room is aware, things change very quickly around here, especially in a 45-day session. And a few hours after we were on the floor, those discussions began again to try to fill this seat, which we've been waiting for a very long time, to try to make sure that commission is fully up to speed on having its membership. And so once the agreed upon consensus candidate occurred yesterday, the wheels were put in motion to try to facilitate this vote as quickly as possible. And so I just want my colleagues across the aisle to know at the moment we were debating that yesterday or answering those questions, that was accurate. Again, the shifting winds happening here as they do, that changed very quickly. And now I think we're in a posture that, at the very least, both majority parties feel very comfortable that they have a consensus candidate and would like to move forward today. So I would ask the members of the body to resist and vote no on the floor amendment, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Phillicorn.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to speak in support of the floor amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, we discussed this on the floor yesterday, and I respect my colleague from the Shenandoah who said things happen quickly and spur of the moment. But I quote, he said, anything involving the State Corporation Commission will be at a much later date. So following up on what my colleague from Fairfax has said, this has risen suddenly, without notice, with no transparency. We spend so much time on the floor focusing on transparency on both sides of the aisle. We have spent so much time on the floor talking about the Virginia way. This is not the Virginia way. This is not in the best interest of our constituents. And I would also say that we have not had ample opportunity to even research this nominee. I respect the fact that the other side of the aisle might have a consensus nominee, but this is an important position. This is something that we have been discussing and waiting for over a year. And now to suddenly come through and have us make a decision without ample time to review, to study, to research, I think is a disservice to our constituents and to the public. And again, we really need to do what's in the best interest of our constituent and focus on the Virginia way and transparency, Mr. Speaker. I urge us to support the floor amendment.
Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Shenandoah, Delegate Gilbert.
Speaking to the floor amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Mr. Speaker, this candidate did not materialize out of thin air, and she is not somebody that is a great mystery to the general public, and especially a great mystery to this body and our colleagues down the hall. The agreed upon candidate has been in public service for the entirety of her professional life. She served
Mr. Speaker?
Point of order.
Delegate from Charlottesville, Delegate Toscano.
With all due respect to my colleague who seemed to have his voice back,
is he not speaking to the merits of the candidate as opposed to the motion itself?
I'm speaking to the motion, Mr. Speaker. I'm speaking to the floor amendment.
I think he's speaking to the floor amendment. And I would say to the gentleman, I could have said the same thing. Really, this amendment should not be in this part of the process. This amendment really should be later on, but certainly understood that. And so I think the gentleman can continue.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So this particular candidate served as the Director of Department of Juvenile Justice right here in our fair city. She served as the Secretary of Public Safety. She was elected by this body as a Juvenile and Domestic Relations Court judge. She was elected by this body not once but twice as a Circuit Court judge. She was the Chief Deputy Attorney General in the Attorney General's office. She served on the Code Commission. She served on the Crime Commission. She now serves on the Ethics Commission. This is not a mystery candidate, okay? And everybody knows everything about her, and if there are some things you don't like, and those are the real reasons that we want to delay this, I understand that, but let's say that and not pretend like we don't know anything about her. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Fairfax, Delegate Fullercourt.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say that this is a mystery candidate.
Delegate would like to speak to the
Yes, please, Mr.
Delegate
Speaker. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity. I would say to the delegate from Shenandoah that indeed this candidate actually is a mystery candidate, that we have not heard of this individual previously, and I'm not claiming that she's not intelligent or bright. What we're saying is that this is not the way to move forward. This is not transparency. This is a process issue as well. We have not had ample opportunity to look into this individual. I think process is important here. And I'd also like to say that in the past, we have had time to research, to look into the publications of various candidates, and this name was first given to us yesterday. There have been other names in the process that we've been waiting for a year, but we were uninformed of this individual until yesterday. And I think, again, this is all about transparency. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Arlington, Delegate Lopez.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So speaking of the resolution.
Speaking of the floor amendment.
Floor amendment, I apologize. To most Virginians, I mean, the SEC is a bit of an enigma wrapped in a mystery. But let's be clear, it's got immense power in the Commonwealth. It's where corporations get a charter. It's where electric companies go to ask for rate increases, where insurance companies go to check about whether or not they're in good health. It started off as a progressive notion, and it still is in many ways. The creation of the SEC in the early 20th century was a decisive shift in the organization of state government. Regulatory decision-making moved from the legislature to a permanent body which could hire specialists and conduct inquiries. At the time, the nation's railroads were growing at a phenomenal rate and had become essential to economic expansion. Unfortunately, excessive power and corruption accompanied that rapid growth. Typical Virginian in 1900 lived in a farm or a small rural community. Unfair freight and passenger rates charged by railroads in Virginia were among the chief grievances of a growing number of farmers and populists and progressives. Formally, the SEC is charged with administering Virginia's laws related to the regulation of public utilities, insurance, state-chartered financial institutions, investment securities, retail franchising, and railroads. It's the state's central filing for the corporations, limited partnership, limited liability companies, and the UCC liens. Their jurisdiction includes almost all of major businesses in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Since its inception, citizens have had a right to appear before the SEC. They've had a right to, it implements the Affordable Care Act. It's 57 banks with over 1,000 branches. Basically, the SEC plays a central role in Virginia's energy economy as well. It oversees everything from the construction of new solar farms to the deployment of energy efficiency programs by utilities. As such, the Commission governs the speed and scope of Virginia's transition to an advanced energy economy. This role has become all the more important in the past with the passage of the Grid Modern Transformation Security Act, SB 966, last year. Just in 2018, the SEC addressed wind and solar development, grid modernization, and the IOU's IRPs. Because of its unique structure and duties, it's been described as the fourth branch of government, and repeatedly, as the most powerful regulatory body in America. The most powerful regulatory body in America. The SEC structure is unique in that it's organized as a separate department of government here in Virginia with delegated administrative, legislative, and judicial powers. No other state has placed in a single agency such a broad array of regulatory responsibility. SEC decisions can only be appealed to the Virginia Supreme Court. The SEC's 3 judges are elected by the General Assembly, but other than that, there is no accountability to the Commonwealth it serves. We've not had time to properly vet this individual. We found out about her candidacy literally hours ago. We should be asking, will this person fully and faithfully follow the laws established by the General Assembly, such as the Grid Transportation and Security Act? Can they effectively and independently regulate the utilities? How familiar is this candidate with advanced energy and its benefits for Virginia's economy and consumers? We've not seen the breadth of her writing. We haven't been able to discuss her positions extensively and appropriately, or her time as a judge. Where is the transparency? And what we've learned over the past few hours has given us pause. We have questions about her positions on climate change, the Affordable Care Act, gay marriage. The SEC is far too important and covers so much of what Virginia citizens deal with every day. We need to be able to truly debate and vet this position and the candidate.
Delegate from Fauquier, Delegate Weber.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
Just real quick, I'd like to point out that the candidate in question did not receive a single no vote upon her certification, so the committee felt that she was certified to serve in this position. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Delegate from Virginia Beach, Delegate Mayars.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Speaking to the amendment.
Delegate has the floor.
I know there may be some questions about Patricia West that have been raised here. I had the pleasure, perhaps maybe the only person in this body who's had the pleasure of being in front of her in court, though I think maybe perhaps, I'm sorry to my esteemed colleague from Norfolk, Delegate Lindsay, but I can tell you that in my experience as a prosecutor, then also in practice in front of Judge West, she is one of the finest judges I've had the pleasure of being in front of. When you're a circuit court judge, oftentimes every day you're dealing with people that are there on their worst day. These are people that have both been the victims of some of the most horrific crimes or the stress of unbelievable litigation that's involving their business and their life and their property and their homes. And what's the type of quality we would want for somebody in this position, particularly one that balances the needs of citizens and businesses and consumers? And I think one of the most important qualities is the ability to listen. And I saw that every day when I was in court with Judge West, as well as an incredible amount of compassion for those whose lives have been traumatized as the victim of crime, as well as a unbelievable adherence to the rule of law. So my personal experience there, she's eminently qualified. It's been already noted, she is not a new face. She's been proved by this body several times before in a variety of different positions. And I think it'd be the pleasure of this body to strike down the floor amendment. Thank you.
Delegate from Scott, Delegate Kilgore.
Mr. Speaker, I have a motion.
Delegate has the floor.
I move the pending question.
Delegate Kilgore moves the pending question. All those in favor of that motion signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes have it. The pending question is moved. The question is on the floor amendment offered by Delegate Simon. All those in favor of the floor amendment will say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no. No. The noes have it. The floor amendment is defeated. There are sufficient votes for the ayes and nays. Shall the floor amendment be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 43, noes 52.
Ayes 43, noes 52. The floor amendment is defeated. The delegate from Pennsylvania, Delegate Adams.
Mr. Speaker, I move the adoption of the resolution.
Shall the resolution be agreed to? Clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 78, noes 0.
Ayes 78, noes 0. The resolution is agreed to. The delegate from Pennsylvania, Delegate Adams, will communicate